All right, on this episode of Bare Knuckle Bowker, very excited to be talking with an individual who got quite the victory at Rizin 46, a historic win, and looking forward to going over that in a few regards, getting that first round knockout over Justyn Martinez, and very excited to be speaking to Tatsuki Shinotsuka on the show today. How are you doing, Tatsuki?
そうですね、ベアナックルデビューして、こちらも見事な起用だったんですけど、今日出てくれてありがとうございます。調子はどうですか？
調子めちゃめちゃいいです。常にいいです。
I feel fantastic. I always feel great.
And just, being part of history, like, I guess I'm kind of curious on a bit of a timeline. Like, when did Rizin initially come to you with this opportunity to fight under like a BKFC style rule set?
篠塚選手は本当に日本の格闘技界としては歴史的な一戦を自らの手で作ったわけなんですけれども、具体的にこのオファーがあって、このベアナックルライジンがやろうっていうオファーがあったので、どういう流れだったんですか？
そうですね。マイアミ一緒に見に行ってやりたくなって。
Yeah, so Sakakibara, he took me to the Bare Knuckle event in Florida. And I attended it, I saw it, and it hit me, and I knew that this is something that I have to try out, and that's how it all started.
And is it important to you to become part of a historic thing like that, just with it being the first BKFC fight to take place in Rizin and just expanding bare knuckle even more globally?
篠塚選手としては、このようにベアナックルボクシングに初めてチャレンジして、日本で初めてやって、自分の競技者としてもいろいろとチャレンジしていく。こういうことは自分自身にとって意味のあること。
意味あるんですよね。やっぱ新しいこと好きなんで、挑戦していきたいんで。
Yeah, it means everything. I like new things, and I constantly like trying, pushing myself and challenging new things. So this makes perfect sense.
And was there anything different you did in your preparations? I mean, predominantly your experience looks to be centric in kickboxing from what I've seen. So the obvious would be like the kicks not being as predominant in the camp. But I know some fighters in bare knuckle, at least some guys I've talked to, kind of swear by certain hand strengthening techniques. Like, did you do anything different in preparation for this bare knuckle fight, or was it largely almost like preparing for a glove boxing bout in a lot of regards?
篠田選手、この試合が決まって、特別に何か意識をして、今までのファイトキャンプとは違うやり方っていうのをしたことあります。
いや、殴り方です。殴り方はボクシングじゃなくても空手の突きしたって。それがメイン。
Yeah, so the main change I made to my style is that I stopped fighting kickboxing style and worked on my karate style. My karate, my strikes from karate instead of kickboxing strikes. That's what I focused on. I had to change my striking from kickboxing to karate.
What was it about karate preparations that you felt lent itself well to this bare knuckle fight? I'm curious if you could maybe get more into that potentially.
篠塚選手が空手がベアナックルボクシングで生きるって思う理由はどういうふうに空手が生きる？
やっぱ空手も素手で殴る競技なんで、やっぱその辺はグローブ使う打ち方が違うです。
Yeah, so karate also it's a combat sport where you strike with your bare hands. So there's different technique in striking with your bare hands rather than strikes that were developed based off of having gloves on. So that's why karate strikes work most well when you're fighting bare knuckle.
No, I mean, makes sense. That's interesting to get that kind of insight, though, and everything. I guess I'm curious with your opponent, Justyn Martinez, like how aware of him you might have been prior to the fight, because before fighting you, he had actually had 4 bare knuckle fights and had some MMA experience prior. Like, how aware of Justyn Martinez were you before this fight, or was it mostly focused on your own preparations and whatnot, I suppose?
ジャスティン・マルシン選手は、ベアナックルでも試合やってましたし、MMA もやってた選手なんですけども、自分自身としてはジャスティン・マルティネス選手をどれだけ研究しましたか？それとももう本当に自分としては自分がベアナックルに向けて調整する、それのみに集中していた。相手のことをどれぐらいしてました？
相手のことそんな気にしてなかったです。ベアナックル仕様に自分を仕上げるっていうメインですね。
Yeah, so I didn't really care for my opponent that much. I was more focused on adjusting myself for the bare knuckle rules.
It's kind of interesting because Rizin sometimes will present like an element of mystery to the whole thing, and as far as like the public didn't know of your opponent until like fairly close to the fight. Like, did you I mean, I imagine you were aware of your opponent before that, even though you outlined you were more focused on your own preparations. But yeah, what did you think of that, I guess? Because it seemed like they were kind of like creating an air of mystery around who you'd be fighting in this bare knuckle fight leading in.
ライジンって過去にもこうミスター X とかでこう対戦相手は結構言わなかったりすることがあるじゃないですか。まあ当然、篠塚選手は自分自身のこの対応で、集中してたので、そこは気にしないと思うんですけれども、自分の相手がずっとミスター X って名前が出ないことに関して、どういうふうに。
まあ、自分は分かってるんで、特に何も、その方が盛り上がるんだったら、X の方がいいなって感じです。
Yeah, well, the important thing is that I knew who I was fighting. And, if the promoter thinks that, keeping, not revealing the opponent gains more interest, then let it be. The important thing is that I knew my opponent.
Yeah, for sure. And it looked like based on your opponent's Instagram story, you guys had kind of like taken a photo after the fight and whatnot. So that was nice to see. Seemed like mutual respect there between yourself and Martinez.
試合終わった後、挨拶して、こう、一緒に写真なんか撮ったと思うんですけど、このベアナックルやることによって、こう、普通の試合以上のリスペクトっていうのは相手に生まれるものです。
いや、まあ生まれると思うんですね。やっぱ、あんな素手のと付き合いできるやつなかなかいないんで、出てるだけでリスペクトと思う。
Yeah, I think it takes a different kind of man to step in there and fight, throw down with bare hands. And I don't think there's not too many fighters out there who can do it. So I think, just fighting, competing in this sport, bare knuckle, that itself is something to respect. So I think, when you fight with bare hands, bare knuckles, I think it develops some kind of a bond amongst the fighters because it's just so brutal.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess kind of speaking to the element of mystery, like I'd mentioned, your opponent wasn't necessarily revealed until like fairly close proximity to the fight. It looked like in a press conference you came out with 3 masked men leading into the fight. Is that a secret? Can you kind of reveal the identities of those individuals, or is that kind of under wraps, as it were?
篠塚選手が会見で発表したときに、こう、裏にマスクマンが3人謎の3人いたんですけど、あのコンセプトってどういうものなんでしょうか？
コンセプト、ただの仲間です。
Yeah, they're just my homies.
ただの
Yeah, they're
俺
just
は一
there.
人行動しないんで。
I'm not alone, so I always walk around in groups. So they were there.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I enjoyed that kind of part of it. And I did mention earlier, like a lot of kickboxing experience and whatnot, and a few gloved boxing bouts as well from what I was seeing. Do you think your next fight will be back in the space of kickboxing under the Rizin banner, or are you interested in more bare knuckle and would like to kind of have that as your next fight, I suppose?
下に言えばいい。
篠塚選手の次の相手、次の試合は、そのキックボクシングに戻るのか、MMA に挑戦するのか、それともそのベアナックルをもっと追求していきたいのか、今、ご自身はどんな。
今はもうベアナックルですね。次のアメリカに向けて、アメリカで日本人のやばさを伝える。
Yeah, right now I'm solely focused on bare knuckle. They told me that my next fight will be in the United States, so I'm gonna go show the U.S. crowd that how badass Japanese fighters really are.
That's really cool. I was going to ask that a bit later, like if you had a desire to kind of fight stateside in BKFC. So cool, that's like already part of the plans. Like, did they specify a timeline for that? Like, I want you to enjoy this victory, obviously, but I guess I only ask because it was a fairly brief fight. So I would think you could potentially facilitate a somewhat quick turnaround if you were interested in that.
まあ、アメリカでやるのは素晴らしいことだと思いますし、もうそれもまさに聞こうと思ってたんですけども、もうその話がすでに行われてるのはすごいいいことだと思うんですけども、詳細とかでいつ頃とかっていう話は聞いてるんですか？言える範囲。
まあ大体みたいな。大体は聞いてるんですけど、まあ、なんて言っていいんですか？
まあ夏頃でいいんじゃない？
まあ夏頃ですね。
Yeah, I do have an idea, but I think it would be sometime before the summertime or during the summertime.
Summer.
I mean, that
So
is yeah. No, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, he can't really give any specific things, but it's sometime soon.
I guess in terms of like weight category, like what were you kind of thinking? Because from what I was seeing, at least per Tapology, the listed weight for this fight was kind of close to that like 130 pound kind of mark. So in a sense, you could potentially go one way or the other. Like, would you be looking for like flyweight competition within BKFC, or would you be competing in the bantamweight division primarily, you think, at 135?
今回の試合は、キャッチウェイトだったじゃないですか。バンタム級でもフライ級でもこの先いけるかなと思うんですけど、
はい
篠塚選手的にはどの階級でいきたいですか？
まあ、フライですかね。フライ級です。
Yeah, I want to fight at flyweight.
Yeah, I mean, that would be very interesting. I mean, you've collected championships in kickboxing, being that you were the Krush featherweight champion. So I imagine your eyes would at some point be fixated on that BKFC flyweight title. And someone who's also kind of under that Rizin umbrella in a certain regard too, with John Dodson being the champion. Like, obviously, there would be some fights to lead into that, but it seems like a cool time in your career.
ベアナックルで言えば、ジョン・ドッドソン、ライジンに馴染みのある選手が今チャンピオンなんですけれども、彼と戦う将来も見えてくるのかっていうことに関して、ご自身ではどう
しか見てないです。ベアナックルはそこです。
Yeah, I'm only focused on John Dodson and his title right now. That's my goal. That's my whole in BKFC.
I mean, that would be a tremendously exciting fight from what we even just got to see in your first bare knuckle fight. And I guess in talking about some of the specifics of that fight, because it seemed like your opponent really, I guess, pushed like a hectic pace early on, but your composure was really there and you were able to weather that storm and had a lot of, I guess, like patient shot selection that obviously paid off for you. Like, I guess like my first question kind of within that, like, did the fight kind of play out as you expected in that sort of sense, just like your opponent pushing that like frenetic pace early on and you kind of weathering the storm with your composure and shot selection, I guess?
この間の試合は、対戦相手がもうすごいハイペースな試合を押し付けてきて、ガチャガチャ的な展開から試合を作っていくとしたと思うんですけれども、その展開っていうのは事前に予想されてましたか？
予想してましたね。あんな感じだろうな。それしか俺に勝つ方法はないなと思った。それで来ると思った。
Yeah, I anticipated his style, that fast-paced style, because if he were to win, that's the only way he would beat me. That's the only way he can beat me. So I definitely anticipated that chaos, that hectic pace. So it did not phase me.
Yeah, and I mentioned the, I guess, composure component to the whole thing. Like, as much as the BKFC rule set was like a newer combat sport endeavor for you, as I mentioned before, a lot of experience in kickboxing and boxing, and you talked about dipping into your karate experience as well. Like, did your composure and temperament within the fight, just the general calmness, like, did that come from your broader combat sports experience as much as you were entering a new combat sport?
本当に新しい競技をやる。そして相手があんだけガチャガチャな作戦を立ててきても非常に冷静ですごく落ち着いているように見えました。その中でしっかりとパンチを選んでカウンターも当ててやっていたふうに思えるんですけれども、新しい競技に挑戦するにおいて、そこのいろんな経験をしてきてるわけです。空手とかキックボクシングとか。それの経験が篠塚選手のその試合の冷静さにどのように影響しているのか。
いやもうそうですね、今回の試合のテーマは常に冷静でいるだった。冷静じゃなくなった瞬間、絶対左出したりするんで、常に冷静で、じゃなきゃ当てるところもやっぱ怪我しちゃうんで、常に冷静を意識してます。
Yeah, the theme heading into this fight was patience. And that's my sole focus on this fight, because if I'm not focused and patient, and if I rush things, I would get hit, and I would hit my opponent in a way where I would injure my fist. So even at the time of impact, I needed to be focused and patient, and I needed to pick the right shots to protect myself and my fist.
And I mean, I feel like that kind of begs the question, like, how are your hands doing in the wake of the fight? Like, it seemed like you were very mindful of that, like, shot selection and the fact that, I guess, like, chambering and connecting a punch in bare knuckle is a bit different than what you would do in gloved combat. So how are your hands feeling in the wake of this BKFC fight under the Rizin banner?
実際まあ、拳をすごくこう大事にして、こう打撃を選んでっていうふうにおっしゃったんですけど、実際どうですか、拳は試合終わった後。普段とは違う。
いや、まあ、壊れてないんで、全然大丈夫です。やっぱ、頭殴ったら壊れてたんですけど、狙って言ってたんで、今回は怪我なしですね。
Yeah, so my fists are fine. My knuckles are fine. I'm not injured seriously. It's because I think it's because I picked my shots. If I had randomly threw my hands and hit the skull part, I think I would have injured my hand. But since I was calm and I was composed and I picked my shots to exactly where I wanted to hit, so I think my hands are injury free this time.
Yeah, well, that's great to hear. And I was noticing the vast majority of your finishes, both in gloved and now gloveless combat, have happened in the first round. But just seeing you fight, like it's very clear that you're not trying to overextend and I guess overly seek out the finish. Like the composure and the patience is very much there. How do you, I guess, find yourself getting those kind of early finishes as much as you're like keeping that cerebral approach and not like overextending and overly chasing that, I suppose.
篠塚選手の試合を見てると、やっぱ1ラウンド KO が多かったりするんですけれども、その篠塚選手はこう、あんまり行き過ぎないっていうことを結構心がけたりしています。
前まではもう行くしか考えてなかったんですけど、最近はそうです。ちゃんと3ラウンドとかも、その試合によってちゃんと試合を組み立てようってなってです。前まではもう1ラウンドぶっ飛ばしてやるしかなかったんで、それは変わったですね。
So before, I used to be I'm just gonna go in there and just beat this guy up. I'm just gonna finish as soon as I can. But just starting recently, I've started to kind of think and kind of put together a game plan, and I would pick when to be aggressive, when to be defensive, depending on the time of the round. I started to calculate and use my head a lot more than I used to.
Yeah, for sure. And this question isn't really like related to bare knuckle so much, but I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't touch on your last kickboxing fight, which took place on New Year's Eve and everything like that. Getting the win, obviously, a great thing there as you got the decision victory over Daichi Tomizawa. But what was it like taking part in such a, I guess, spectacle, New Year's Eve in Japan, such a rich tradition associated with that?
平塚選手の最後のキックボクシングは、昨年の大晦日、ライジンで富澤選手とやったんですけども、その日本の格闘技の伝統といえば大晦日、その舞台で戦えたっていうのは、どういう景色でしたか、どういう気持ちでしたか。
最高の景色でもずっとちっちゃい頃から出たかったんで、ただただ最高でした。
Yeah, it was an absolutely amazing experience. Like it was a dream of mine. It was a childhood dream of mine to stand in the New Year's Eve ring at that arena. So for me, it was a dream come true moment, and words cannot describe.
Well, I love hearing that. It seems like a lot of great things have happened recently. Cool to hear you got to live that dream with the New Year's Eve appearance. And it seems like a lot of cool stuff is on the horizon for you with this BKFC endeavor. Like, I guess one of the questions that I had had previously, I mean, you obviously had articulated you want to like make a big run at this and win the title. But for some fighters, I feel like it's almost like a one and done sort of curiosity kind of thing. Like, did it just feel like something that was very natural to you when you were out there? Like, it just did that performance, I guess, inform this idea that this could feel like a combat sport where you can make a run towards a world title? Or was the goal even heading into this to, I guess, kickstart like a broader run to, get towards BKFC gold eventually, if that makes sense?
ベアナック BKFC って、そのいろんな競技からこうやってきて、まあ、怖いものを試してみたいというふうにやって、1回で終わってしまう人も結構多いんですけれども、篠塚選手は、まあ、1回で終わらなさそうな感じがするんですけど、こう、そういうやってみて、あ、これいける、これで世界取りたいっていうふうに、どういう気持ちになるんですか。
いやー、楽しかったですね、シンプルに。楽しかったし、ジョン・ドットソンがいるんで、目標が見えてるんで。
You know, it was simply super fun. Just going in there, it was a fun time, and it helps to know your target. Like John Dodson is the champion of the flyweight division in BKFC. So it's nice to know who your target is. So that also helped because one, it was fun, and two, I know who I have to fight to become the champion. So both things are very motivating aspects for me.
Yeah, and I mean, a great debut performance in the sport, going to be fun to follow along with the journey. And from what you're saying, seems like we're going to see you sooner than later fighting for BKFC stateside. So very exciting stuff, but also I want to be mindful of your time, Tatsuki. I want to let you enjoy the win and everything like that. So I'm wondering if maybe you had a final thought that you would like to add as we're kind of wrapping things up here.
もう番組のインタビューの最後になりますんで、何か他にご自身でみんなに伝えたいことがあったりとか、海外のリスナーとかに、
はい
伝えておきたいことがあれば、どうぞご自由に発言してください。
日本人は強いところを見てほしいです。
I want to show you guys that Japanese fighters can scrap too.
I think you definitely showed that in the debut, and it's going to be awesome to see the next steps in your career. Hopefully, the first of many chats. And yeah, just wanted to thank yourself, Tatsuki, and also you, Shingo, for the time. And just yeah, congrats on the Rizin 46 victory. Was definitely cool to see, and hopefully you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
ありがとうございました。また
Thank
よろしくお
you.
願いします。期待してますんで、よろしくお願いします。Thanks. Take care, Don.
You too, man.
Thank you.